Hello there. I'm Rob Hudson. I'm a member of the law firm Frost Brown Todd. I'm also a volunteer with the Northern Kentucky Bar Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the NKBA Legend Series. In this series, we interview distinguished Northern Kentucky Greater Cincinnati lawyers in the hopes of helping in our own way to elevate the profession. We have a particular focus on what it takes to succeed as an attorney, both personally and professionally. And that's part of the information that we share through the program. Today's program will be recorded. It's going to be made available to help provide guidance to the next generations of lawyers in our region. For the live attendees, be sure to post your questions on the Q&A or chat features, and I'll ask them at the end of the program. It's another great day for our Legend Series. We're happy to be joined by Ruth Klette, who's practiced law in Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati for more than 40 years. She helps lead Klette and Montel, and this is a law firm that has roots in our region dating back more than a century. She's recognized as a leader in her firm's practice areas, including estate planning, taxation, philanthropy, business, and real estate. She's a member of Impact 100 Cincinnati. This is a women's collective donors organization promoting philanthropy. She chaired the KBA Probate Committee. She served on boards and committees for several of the region's most prominent nonprofits, including the Cincinnati Zoo, the UC Foundation, Covington's Ladies Home, and the NKBA. Ruth, welcome to the NKBA Legend Series, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
It's a terrific day in Northern Kentucky so far. We typically get these interviews started with talking about early influences, prior to the practice of law, growing up, certain factors in your life that maybe led you to a journey to become an attorney. So if you would, let's kick it off by sharing a bit of your background in that regard.
Okay. Both my father and my grandfather were attorneys. And my grandfather, John H. Klette Sr., he was also a probate judge pro tem for a period of time. So my grandparents started life down in Covington, and my grandfather opened his law office with his next door neighbor, who was Clifford Heisel, and a doctor, ear, nose, and throat doctor. So the two of them, not only were they next door neighbors in Covington, but they decided to open their professional offices together in the Coppin building. But then when Dr. Heisel took on a partner and my grandfather took on a partner, the doctors kicked the lawyers out and said, go down by the courthouse, which they did. So my grandfather was a probate real estate type attorney. He was actually active in politics a bit and was somewhat instrumental with the group that got I-75 where it is today. And also he was a part of the group politically, I think maybe while he was judge pro tem, to get the Greater Cincinnati Airport owned by Kenton County in Boone County. So I had heard that many times from my father, but then recently when I was cleaning out my parents' home, I found a lot of documentation that backed up exactly what my father had said. My grandfather started practicing probably back in 1915 or so. He was a graduate of Chase Law School. In the daytime, he taught school at Beechwood and went to law school at night. So my father followed in his footsteps. My father, John H. Klette Jr., was born in 1917, and he attended school in 6th District in Covington, and then Holmes Jr. and Holmes High, and then went to the University of Cincinnati. But he never graduated from UC because you didn't have to graduate from college in order to get into law school back then. So He spent 3 years in arts and sciences, enjoyed things like geography and other topics that I would never have imagined. And then he went directly to law school, and he also went to Chase Law School. So it was kind of in my blood, always seeing lawyers around my household. Oh, and then my grandfather and grandmother and my father and his brother moved from Covington, Wallace Woods, out to Park Hills in 1939. So the house I recently sold has been in our family for about 85 years. So my grandfather was kind of in bad health at the time I was born. So my mother and father stayed in my grandparents' residence, and then we just stayed forever. So my grandfather died in 1956, I think. And at that time, my father had to make the decision to quit flying planes and practice law. So my father took over my grandfather's practice of real estate title work for a lot of savings and loans in town and probate.
So it sounds like it Northern Kentucky and the practice of law and community service, they were all in your blood from a young age.
They were, and I guess I talked about it a lot because on my 6th grade report card, the final one about this time of year, my 6th grade teacher said, "I hope you attain your LLB." Oh, I guess she thinks I'm going to be a lawyer. So I was just kind of on that track, and I just wanted to be with my father, practice with him, and that's what I did. So I went to the University of Cincinnati, and I did graduate in 3 years because I was just hell bent on getting out of school and practicing law with my father. And then I went to Chase Law School, just like my grandfather and my father. And then I went into the practice with my father. So I made it. And do the math, but at the age of 23 is when I started practicing.
Did I know that I had some horrible jobs before I started practicing law that made me very grateful to have become a lawyer. Did you have any early jobs prior to, as you were growing up, that made you think, well, I'd rather be doing something like what my father and grandfather have done?
No, not really. From the time I was in high school, I was helping him in the title room do real estate titles.
Oh, that's a terrific blessing then.
Yeah.
And so what was it like to work with your father, though? A lot of us have, fathers in business or fathers in law. I have a son who's a lawyer now. I'm not sure he'd be too thrilled about practicing with his dad. That idea of maybe, getting out on your own and avoiding how fathers can be demanding and difficult. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you?
Oh, he was demanding and difficult. and he was like 24/7 law. So we would usually get to the clerk's office in Covington about 7:00. He had his own key, and we would do titles and then go back to our office across the street and process them with the staff. I generally would not leave until 6, but we'd always be doing home visits or visiting folks in a nursing home, retirement center. And so it just seemed like work never ended. We didn't have a good work-life balance, I'll tell you that. And it was a good 6 days a week. So it wasn't until my children were born, and again, do the math, that was in 1995, I worked Saturdays all the time. I mean, seeing clients, because my father thought people can't get in during the week. We'll be here on Saturday mornings. So, and then we would also go to counties like Owen County or Pendleton County or Gallatin County on a Saturday morning to do title work, and instead of doing it during the week. So then he was, my grandfather was a shareholder and consequently, my father in the Allison and Rose Funeral Home. So Sunday mornings, my father would go to work at Allison and Rose Funeral Home and help them with their business. Not the funeral, but I mean, the business part of the office.
I mean, Ruth, we had a chance to speak a bit last week, and I love, to the extent that you were ever considering any other profession or vocation, if you would share with the group what you learned when you took a vocational skills type test or a psychology test. What did they tell you?
My parents sent me to a guy, Mr. Meyer. He was in the Carew Tower, and he had those battery of tests to see what you should be, because I guess they wanted to make sure that I really wanted to be a lawyer. So I took all of those tests, and he said, well, looks like you're going to be a lawyer. I said, okay.
Well, and it certainly worked out. You talked about the long hours with your dad and in your practice. And one of the subjects we cover in this program is how to develop practice excellence, practice proficiency, and the kind of commitment it really takes to get there. So, sort of beginning with your early years and as you progressed and learned, what did it take to become a great lawyer?
It just takes, I think, time for you to absorb the practice, how to do it, how to interact with people, how to analyze all the different facets of law and apply them to whatever your current problem is. So it's experience of, oh, I've done that. Oh, I know what to expect. And you just can't get around the fact that you have to put in the time and the effort, and then things turn out better than if you don't know.
And at times, maybe not to have such a terrific work-life balance, especially in private practice, right?
Right.
Well, and so in general terms, what's your advice to newer or younger lawyers in terms of, how to become proficient?
I would just say to try to have a couple of areas of law that you can really focus on and know everything about that. Because being a generalist and knowing a little bit about everything, you're going to lose out on the momentum in different areas or the nuances. So that's a big advantage, I think, to being in a firm, a large firm like you, because you can focus. But when you're in a small firm, family firm, the whole practice is more or less focused. So you can say we miss some things. Now, my father would always make me do other things besides real estate and probate. He would make me do divorce. He would make me do bankruptcy. I would never do that because I think that's just a liability waiting to hatch. I appreciate the fact that he wanted me to be exposed to other areas of law, but I couldn't just do what he said and go research and research and research, because I had this project I had to do. And so you need to have mentors. And my father didn't know anything about bankruptcy or divorce or criminal law. So the one time that I got a criminal case from one of our clients, I called Frank Trusty and I said, Frank, I'd love to learn, but can you help me out on this case? And if I had a car accident case, I would call up Larry West and say, hey, Larry, I have this case. Will you help me? So you need to know who you can go to. And if I had a trial in Boone County, I would always get Bill McAvoy to help me. So, I mean, it meant splitting fees and all of that, but that's fine. It's better than getting sued for not knowing what you're doing.
That's been a wonderful theme of our Legend series. The people in this Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati community who've been willing to help newer or younger lawyers, and the willingness for the newer or younger lawyers to reach out and share fees, and to not try to go it alone in a subject matter area that can be uniquely challenging for them. So, and it sounds like there were people there to help you when you needed it here. Yeah.
Right.
Well, In terms of your mentoring from your father in the practice of law, it sounds like you all had an opportunity to work together when you were younger, but as your practice developed, did you have more and more opportunities to work with them, hand in glove there?
In what way?
Well,
Inside the
in
practice
terms
or?
of partnering up on matters together, and I don't know if you two were in different subject matter areas or whether you were in the same area.
No, about the same. I mean, we would both work a large estate together. Or if he had a large real estate based title to do, I would help. But we tried to really not work on the same client at one time unless it was billable. I mean, you have to watch out on that double billing stuff.
Well, and at some point you're starting out with your dad, and you're becoming proficient as an attorney.
Mhm.
But at some point you begin to develop your own repeat business and referrals from the community. What was your time frame when you felt like, okay, I'm not just working with dad anymore, I'm developing my own practice? And how did you go about doing that?
Well, the real estate part of it was basically my grandfather's and his. We would develop what I would call a side real estate business, which would be just private independent clients. So I think you just develop that by being known as, quote, a real estate or a probate expert. And then your clients will refer other people, or people will just hear about you. And I think we did pretty well, assuming we didn't have Facebook back then to really broadcast what we did. So it's just, I think, doing a good job for the clients you do have, keeping them informed, communicating with them, because just around town, I hear people complain that, well, I called my lawyer 5 times and they haven't called me back. And I'm just, very frustrated and very scared, and what's going on. So on the other hand, we know lawyers are stretched pretty thin and juggling a lot of balls, so to speak, because we have a lot of cases, but you still have to service your clients on whatever matter they have in terms of making sure they know you're there and you're working on it, even if you're just working on it in the back of your mind and come up with a solution later. But it comes down to the old thing of customer service, communication.
Well, one of the great frustrations, I think, for a lot of newer lawyers, it certainly was for me, that that developing that kind of repeat business and a reputation in the community just takes a while.
It does.
And there's when you're just out of law school and you want to be a smashing success, to have to wait a few years before things really start happening, I think for me, it was maddening. I went into he was a partner, I wasn't a partner, and said, I just said, what's it going to take? I've been trying this now for years, and I'm happy to have plenty of work, but I want to start developing my own, repeat business and client referrals and things like that. And he calmed me down and encouraged me, which was pretty good advice at the time. But how long did it take you to get to the point to where you thought, okay, now people are calling Ruth? I'm just as much a partner in this business as anybody else.
I'd say about 10 years.
Yeah. Yes, I'm definitely in your range on that. And so, yeah, for the newer and younger lawyers, it's a lot of patient capital. And so you hope to have a place where you can stay busy like you did and like I did until such time as you start building your own business, but it doesn't happen overnight. So you alluded to some of your principles and advice as to how to become a trusted counselor for clients, the communication but are there other pointers that you can offer as far as how to elevate yourself to that status where you're someone's lawyer and they will call you?
Well, I would say if you do a good job for them, you stay up to date on the law, you know what's going on, because you don't want to be surprised, show up in court and, oh, by the way, there's a new case or that law was amended. So you need to stay on top of what the law is, what the precedent is, and communicate that clearly to the court and counsel. I think you need to be very steady and deliberate about what you're doing. Have a somewhat calm demeanor, because people, clients, I think when they see you, they're coming in pretty edgy, and you really need to get the client to trust that you know what you're doing. And I mean, that's just a little tiny thing. Do you look like a lawyer? I mean, this to me nowadays is kind of an issue, but not. You figure, you know, if somebody has the guts to wear jeans and a t-shirt to work, they must be a super lawyer, because who would do that? You know, now the courts, obviously, you have to dress the part, but when you're in your office, are you giving your clients confidence? Do you look like a lawyer? I think people have a certain expectation on certain days of the week. So weird or not, it's just, it goes back to the 60s and 70s. You dressed for the part. You know, you see somebody and you say, well, who are they? And one cue would be how they're dressed. So the pandemic and all that business that kind of changed some of the norms on dress. I think the court has not changed their norms, but you can walk into the grocery store now in the middle of the day and see a lawyer and go, who's that? Because he's not in his suit. But then say, oh, I guess he's working. I don't know. So I think confidence in an attorney is from knowledge, demeanor, presence. And that's, I think, what clients want, and attention. So they want to know that you're working on their case, you're making progress. But as I told you the other day, I think it's really frustrating how long it takes to get anything done in the law. Sure, I know if I need to research something on 10 different cases, I only have so many hours in the day, so many days in the week, and so forth. But to hear that I want a hearing date and, oh, maybe October, there's some availability, clients actually can die waiting for their case to be heard. I can't disagree with them that this system is wacky. It doesn't really serve them that well. So I know we all need time for research and preparation and to sort things out and see how, find out if what our client is saying is true or what are the real facts. And that takes time and effort, and things kind of settle. But, you know, to have things be pushed out and pushed out and pushed out is very frustrating.
I think one of the great blessings that you would have had is, you know, and I think back to how I tended to approach things as a newer lawyer. When you don't have the full and complete knowledge base, it's hard to be calm and confident and project in the right way. And thinking back to your experience, you got to practice with one of the greatest, your dad, and you got to sort of witness and observe how he handled things, how he handled people, how he handled conflict and controversy. And so that must have been extremely beneficial, I would think.
It was, I would say he was always well prepared. And I think that's a key to anything you do, is to be prepared. Just don't go in and wing it and say, well, I hope I got it right. You have to know and be willing to look it up and put in the time.
Well, we always try to touch on community service as a means of elevating the profession and service to the profession. and, in my practice, if I had just done labor and employment law for 35 years, I don't think I'd still be practicing labor and employment law. It has to be about something more than, or usually it's about something more than just billing hours and trying to make a living. And I know this was important to you early on too. I had mentioned in the introduction a few of the things that you've done, but generally, what are your views on community service for members of our profession, and how did you become involved, and what have been some of your favorite? I just asked you a compound question.
Okay, compound.
What are
So I'll
some of your favorite endeavors in the community service realm?
all right. So I started out getting involved in the Bar Association. And back then, that was the Kenton County Bar Association. So you belonged to the Bar Association in which your principal office was. And then there was Campbell County and Boone County. So I was on the board, I believe, for several years of the Kenton County Bar. I also, to get trial experience, I was a public defender. And I remember Judge Worman and several of the other guys. And there was Whitey's Cafe and the little restaurant on the corner. So everybody would go there for lunch, and you could really talk to all the defense attorneys and say, well, how'd you do that? I was watching you. So even though criminal law had nothing to do with real estate and probate, that's how I started getting into court. And I kind of think that's a service because there was really no money in it. They might pay you $35 an hour, but then that was discounted at the end of the month. So I have served on the Covington Ladies Home Board. And so I think serving on nonprofit boards, you see the service side that's needed in the community to provide services to people. So be it Brighton Gardens, Brighton Center, if you're involved in that type of organization, you're going to see the needs of the community, people that have a need for food, clothing, diapers for their kids, education, something to do, keep the kids out of trouble. So I think getting into the nonprofit world helps you to not only see the needs of the community, but also to meet members of the community and to meet other volunteers that may be doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. And if you work with all of those other people, you're going to get clients because people will recognize you as an attorney, even though you have jeans and a t-shirt on, if you're doing service at the nonprofit. But just acknowledging the fact that the nonprofit segment of our community is the third leg of the stool. We have government, we have business, and we have nonprofits. So the service that young lawyers should have, and older lawyers too, is to help nonprofits with their revenue stream by advocating for them, introducing their friends and neighbors to the nonprofits and telling them what they do. What does the nonprofit do for the community? Because so many times in our current work, my current work with the Elsa Sewell Foundation, nonprofits' major complaint, I'll say, is we wish people knew about us and what we do, why we do it, and how we do it, and why we need community support. So that's why I believe that young lawyers, middle-aged lawyers, older lawyers, everyone should get involved in the community because it'll benefit you by getting clients, but it benefits the community and the nonprofits, which are so vital to a lot of services that are provided by the legal profession. The Life Learning Center helps clients that most of us would have. Family Nurturing Center helps out in divorce situation. You could sit and talk and think about lots of nonprofits that are of assistance.
One, tell us a little bit about your foundation work these days. I guess at some point in time in your career, you moved over into the philanthropy realm, and so and I'm sure some of our attendees may not be familiar with your foundation and your work there. So we'd appreciate it if you could share that as well.
Okay, sure. If you remember back in the beginning of our conversation, I told you that my grandfather and Dr. Heisel and their families lived in one two-family down in Covington on Greenup Street. Dr. Heisel and his wife had one daughter, Elsa. My grandparents had two sons, my father and his brother George. So for a couple of years, they lived literally next door to each other. And then Dr. Heisel and my father practiced their professions in the same office for a couple of years. And the Heisels stayed in Covington on Scott Street. My grandparents moved to Wallace Woods and then moved to Park Hills. But their friendship was forever. And my grandfather helped Dr. Heisel with a lot of real estate transactions in Covington. So anyway, my father and Elsa and my uncle all attended school from 6th District all the way through University of Cincinnati. Very close family ties there. Elsa was an only child and had no one to really leave her estate to. I mean, she left some money to some friends and some cousins, distant, very distant. But the bulk of her estate, she left to her private foundation that she had started a few years prior to her death, because she was really invested in the community. And she helped a lot of people during her life, neighbors that needed food, clothing, help with tuition for college or trade school. She would actually take it out of her own pocket and do that. So she started a private foundation and then didn't really want to use it until after her death, because you get a better tax deduction if you do it individually. But she sponsored Sam the Eagle at the Cincinnati Zoo and just had a lot of interests. I think her husband, Alader, served on the Children's Hospital that used to be over in Fort Wright. So anyway, Elsa died January of 2010. So the foundation was funded incrementally after that. And we just follow her direction on what type of causes she wanted to support. And we update it to what are the community needs and priorities right now. So I had never had anything to do with a private foundation. So when she died, I called a friend of mine, Bruce Crone. He's an attorney in Cincinnati. He runs the Charles Dater Foundation. Similar situation, he and his father, lawyers together, and Charles Dater was a friend and client. And so they set up the Charles Dater Foundation, and at his death, it was funded. So I knew that Bruce had been running that foundation for quite some time. So I called him up and said, Bruce, I'm trustee of this foundation. I don't know what to do. How do I figure out what to do? I know legally it's a charitable trust, but what do you do? So Bruce said, you need to join the Association of Small Foundations. It's a national organization. Go to their conferences, and they have fantastic lectures that will teach you everything from tax law regarding private foundations, tax preparation, ethics, conflicts of interest, and how to interact with grantees, how to structure grant agreements, how to structure grant applications, and how to do your due diligence and be strategic in your grant making. So that's what I did. So philanthropy, since I've been through all of this education, in the other world, is an investment, I believe, in the organizations in our community that provide valuable services that produce results. And it's, I could go through a litany of what we look for, but we look for the business structure of these nonprofits to know that they're going to be around, that they're sustainable. So those are some of the qualifications that we look for, and who's running them, and what's their vision. At the end of the day, what is it do they think is going to happen if they do everything they say they're going to do? What results will they get? But then looking at what are their incremental outcomes on a quarterly basis, annual basis, and do those outcomes produce an impact? So have they changed the world the way they wanted to? And what is the impact for the people that they serve and for our community? So those are some of the things that go into it. But we've been doing that for 13 years, getting to know a lot of people. We do about 100 grants a year. And so we do individual site visits for each grant application. So that takes a lot of time because we want to see the people face to face, the facility, where are they working if there is a facility, and meet the people that they're serving, see the programs in action. So we have 3 cycles a year, and then because of Elsa's love for education, we have spendable scholarships, not endowments, but spendable scholarships at NKU, University of Cincinnati, Mount St. Joe, and Xavier. And there's a reason for each one of those. University of Cincinnati, we have 4 undergraduate scholarships because Elsa loved UC. She was an English major and also studied at the College Conservatory of Music because she loved opera. So we also have a $20,000 annual scholarship for a medical student because Dr. Heisel graduated from the University of Cincinnati Medical College back in, I think, 1912. And at that point in time, he went straight from Woodward High School directly to the University of Cincinnati. Didn't even do 3 years of undergraduate and go on. He just high school to medical school. And he played on the basketball team at UC, the collegiate basketball team. So we have a scholarship there in his name, the 4 scholarships at UC in her name. And then we started 3 scholarships at Xavier in memory of Peter J. Summey, because Patricia Summey is on our board. So when Pete died unexpectedly, and he had known Elsa, we did those spendable scholarships. Elsa loved to play bridge, and her favorite partner was Sister Jean Patrice Harrington over at Mount St. Joe. So we started some scholarships at Mount St. Joe in the mathematics department, card counting type thing, because Elsa and Sister Jean Patrice were such great card sharks. And NKU, we have 4 scholarships in the College of Informatics because Elsa's friend, Dick Murgatroyd, who's also on our board, he started the College of Informatics way back, I think in 1970 or 68, when it was just in a trailer at the old site in Park Hills next to Chase. So Elsa loved radio and television, and therefore we have the scholarships at the College of Informatics. So those are the scholarships that we have and the purposes why they're there. So she really doesn't have a connection to Thomas More that we can find. So unfortunately, we don't have any scholarships at Thomas More.
Well, I love the fact that the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you developed as a lawyer, as as you were presented with this opportunity, you were then able to apply those knowledge and I think you're being a little modest. I think you were very well suited to your current role with the foundation. And also I just wanted to say on a quick side note, thank you for honoring Pete Summey, one of the finest lawyers in Northern Kentucky for many, many, many years. And so many people miss Pete, and I'm glad that you're including him in that way. Turning to professional responsibility issues, do you have particular views on civility in the profession? If you look at where you started out at the beginning of your practice to maybe where we've been more recently, are we doing better? Are we doing worse? Are there things we should do differently?
That's hard to say. I would have to say that when I started practicing in 1975, there were probably two other women, Portia Schaefer, and she had an associate. Forget her name at this point. And my Chase Law School class had 110 graduates, and of that, there were 10 women. Now, Judge Sylvia Hendon was one of them. So I would say back in that day, the judges were a little bit condescending and not too helpful. They wanted to get you. And there were some judges that were very nice and helpful, but you didn't necessarily know which one you were going to get. Some of the old lawyers didn't know why you had to be there. I think one of my favorite nicknames might have been Honey. And, that doesn't go over too well in a court situation when folks are calling you honey. But that issue, I think being a woman is not so much an issue anymore. But the civility in terms of, I'd say the thing I don't like about trial work is always you're representing your client and you're out to, some people, destroy the other guy. And so what can I do to destroy them? I'll find something bad about their lawyer or the client and then hammer home on these are bad people. My client, oh, that's an angel. But so I think a lot of people, and I think this work-life balance and, lawyers being stressed out and lawyers being, you never know when you're going to be attacked by another lawyer and say, well, hey, that's not an issue and that's not fair. So when you hear about lawyers that don't want to go to counseling because that would indicate a weakness, and you can't show weakness. So I think those types of attitudes in the legal profession are bad. Now we're saying, oh, well, we've had suicides, we've had problems with mental health, and let's turn that around. Well, I don't know if you're going to do that because it seems like lawyers are always going after other lawyers to gain an advantage in a case. Case is over. Okay, now where are you? Not only did you win the case, but you destroyed the other guy. So why is that healthy? It's not. The other thing I don't like domestic relations, because that, to me, I've done some divorces, and it just seemed like if two people, husband and wife, agree to disagree, they want to get divorced, they want to go their own ways, they kind of settle things up among themselves. And you say, okay, well, I represent husband, wife, you're going to have to get an attorney. She gets an attorney. Next thing you know, the whole thing blows up because the other attorney wants to make money. So let's pick apart everything and draw this thing out so I have enough hours to bill. And I mean, this might be very cynical on my part, but I just felt that happening several times. It's like, just do it, get it over with, everybody go on their separate way. So I think civility, I don't know that it's any different now. I think, as you and I discussed the other day, people have different personalities, whether it's wearing different hats or not. You have your lawyer voice, you have your parent voice, you have your child voice. So when you're interacting with your parent versus your child versus your spouse versus your client versus the other person's client, you take on a different persona. And what I found way back in the beginning, when I was interacting in the bar association, going to events, and doing things on an equal footing with other lawyers, no litigation involved in it, it was easier to get to know the person and their humanity. And then they weren't as bad when you met them in the courtroom or in an adversarial situation. But, you know, if I would meet somebody right out of the gate in an adversarial situation, they could be very ugly. And then the next time I see them, they're like, I don't want to talk to you. But, you know, it's just, I think there's a lot of nastiness, and you do it for the client, for the advantage, for the turn that item to your advantage. But in the long run, I think it's it wears a lot, and you just never know when you're going to be aced out.
Well, and if we get to know each other through the bar association in advance of the time that we're adversaries in court, maybe we can communicate a little better, and maybe we can resolve our differences on behalf of our clients in a more effective way.
Correct.
And, well, I appreciate that as well. And so civility in terms of problem resolution, maybe we've made some corrections with respect to gender equity type issues, treatment with respect to gender, but we're still human beings, and it sounds like we're still struggling on the civility side. Are there any other issues of professionalism or ethics that tended to come up in your practice from time to time that were kind of roadblocks or warning or hazard signs in your areas?
No, not really. I mean, I know I've had a couple probate clients. I was very disappointed that they didn't listen to the court or me, and might have removed assets from the state, and then did what they wanted with it, and then we had more litigation. So I don't know. People seem to disappoint you on occasion when they just do things that they're not supposed to do.
You know, I understand that lawyers are not lily white, but I often hear people say, can you believe that lawyer? Can you believe the argument the lawyer made? Or can you believe how that's going? And I tend to, this may seem unprofessional of me, but I tend to remind them that the client is behind what's happening, and the client has authority and power in this relationship. And so as lawyers, sometimes we can only be as effective and as good as the clients we represent too. But yeah, I've said that to my wife from time to time, and I'm not sure it's carried any weight at all. She still blames the lawyers.
Phyllis Montel and I are lucky enough to be in the same office suite with Tom Rouse. So
yeah,
I can get a hold of him pretty quickly and say, hey, Tom, I got this situation. What do you think?
Well, that's a great point, that we have to reach out for input from folks like Tom to help us along on matters of professionalism. So as we're nearing a wind down time with our discussion, we've got about 10 more minutes. Typically, I ask some questions about mental health, because that's a focus of our NKBA over the last couple of years, trying to help lawyers navigate through difficult times. And when I have an opportunity to talk to one of our legends to hear how, hey, what do you think helped you along? we all have disappointments in our practice of law. Sometimes we feel heartbroken, frustrated, exhausted. How did you cope? What were your hobbies and activities that helped you through?
Well, I guess not proud to say it, but during law school, Tom and Jerry's bar was right down the street from Chase. I like to play golf, and so going out and hitting a ball as hard as I could, that was good. I really didn't have a whole lot of hobbies because I just worked. And that's not good. It's not healthy. And sometimes you have a problem you're trying to work through, and I will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have the answer. So I guess that means I'm thinking about it while I sleep, which is not good. But yeah, I'll have statute of limitations flash by my brain at night and all of those types of warning signs. So,
well, one of the things that I did was coach the kids. I was often not the head coach. I was often just an assistant coach. But at the time I thought, well, this adds to my stress because I'm rushing to the practice. I've got to have a plan. If I'm coaching a game, I've got to know, generally the substitutions and where we're headed. So I thought at the time maybe it added some stress, but at hindsight 2020, I think it helped me because it got me away from the practice of law. And I assume you had some of the same kind of things with your kids.
Yeah, I did that. At my kids' school, the parents were the coaches from kindergarten until I think 7th grade. And so, yeah, I did that. I didn't know beans about soccer, but I became an assistant coach and learned the rules and found out. And kids are great to work with. Yeah, and I would do basketball. And one season, one of the other coaches or parent coaches brought Michael O'Hara in of O'Hara Law Firm to help out. And that was great because he and I grew up, our backyards went together in Park Hills. And so I was always over at their house playing basketball. Who knew that 40 years later, Michael and I would be coaching kids together. So, and then I would do baseball and coach the boys in that. So yeah, I had a good time with sports.
Well, what are some of the greatest sources of satisfaction that you've had outside the practice of law and outside your foundation work?
I would say husband and children. That puts a human face on our existence as opposed to just the law. The law, as they say, is a jealous master or mistress, whichever, and can be so consuming of your time, your spirit, your health, and to get away from that. And see, I had a hard time with my father in terms of getting away because even when we weren't at work, when we were having dinner or at a ball game, he would say, well, now, how many titles do you have to do on Monday? And let's go over those estates. And I'm like, but we're eating dinner or we are at the ball game. Let's watch the game. But he was always going over my to-do list all the time.
Well, you've shared so much with us, but is there any tidbit, something not widely known that people might find interesting about you?
I hope not.
It's your chance to share something, bizarre that you're comfortable sharing about your interests or hobbies and such. Nothing?
No, I think I'm pretty boring. I work.
Yes, I understand. Any final words of wisdom, wit, or advice for the next generations of lawyers in our region?
Well, one other point about being a lawyer is back in the day in 1975, my father kept saying, when you graduate from law school, real lawyers are practitioners. And the guys that can't do it, they'll go off and teach, or they will be a in-house counsel, or they'll do something totally unrelated, but say they're using their legal background. Well, I think nowadays a real lawyer can do almost anything. I mean, there are a lot of lawyers in philanthropy in a lot of different levels. And I think in-house counsel has changed a lot since back in 1975. So I don't think a real lawyer is limited only to practicing, hanging out a shingle and trying to get clients and do the work. But I would say that being a lawyer, you have to practice what you preach. You need to be honest, open, forthright, communicate, and put the time in to absorb all of the knowledge that you have to have about the law, the cases, the nuances, and it'll come. And you know, be human to people, and hopefully don't be a jerk and try to make somebody's day the worst day of their life just to win a case.
Ruth, we can't thank you enough for being a part of the Legend series, for taking time to share with us today this advice for new and future attorneys in the region. Wanted to express a special thanks today for our live attendees. We really do appreciate your support for the program. As always, our wonderful Executive Director, Julie Jones, is going to be sending you CLE information for ethics credits. As always, for the live attendees and otherwise, send us your suggestions for future programs. We are definitely better when we work and collaborate with one another. To all of you, have a terrific day, and thanks again, Ruth.